All right, good afternoon. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We are going to be discussing navigating today's threat landscape with Arctic Wolf. As usual, I am your host, Dr. Jerry Craig. With me today, Brad Hanley. Brad is the manager of MSP Sales Engineering at Arctic Wolf, has more than 15 years IT cyber security experience, 6+ years with Arctic Wolf, and the founding member of the MSP team, formed Arctic Wolf's Regulations and Frameworks Mapping Committee, and has identified and helped fix multiple NIST mapping errors. So, Brad, great to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dr. Jerry, and the Ntiva team. Excited to be here. Threw that last little bullet point in on my bio as a little joke, little nerd cred, if you will.
Yeah, well, NIST needs all the help they can get these days, right? So,
It's true.
thanks for
So
jumping in there. Anything you want to highlight about your experience with Arctic Wolf or what you do in your role, or?
yeah, so I guess my team focuses on our MSP partners, so partners that do managed services to deliver a managed security service to their end customers. And we do all partner enablement and things of that nature. Um, so that's really the core of my role. Got a great team supporting me. Um, Great partners like Ntiva. That's really about it.
Yeah, for those watching, Brad's part of the team that Ntiva directly works with. So any of our customers and clients who are looking for our intrusion detection service, who have feedback, who want to see new things, we're funneling everything through your team as well as others. But you've been kind of that right hand to us to help make this a success. So I'm glad to have that partnership. Looking forward to the topic today. So go to the next slide. We'll cover the agenda real quick. It's going to be just a quick overview of Arctic Wolf for those of you who are not familiar with Arctic Wolf in the industry. Go over some threat reports. Thought this would be a nice change up from the sessions we normally have or that I normally have to where an industry leading vendor partner can tell us here's some of the things that we're seeing. You have a massive store of data, a massive number of incidents that you support. So it's much better to get it straight from you than I guess off the internet. We see real world data. And then we'll probably throw a few questions in there here and there, but at the end, a couple of questions to wrap up, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think the big thing that I want to impress upon those that are watching is unfortunately the volume of threats are increasing, but very fortunately the mitigations that we as IT practitioners and as regular users have are also growing, which is really important. The other thing that I want to kind of touch on prior to like getting really deep into the weeds is it's important to do the core things. We're going to talk a little bit about insurance and what insurance providers are expecting, but doing what other people do is going to be really important from a standpoint of if you're having conversations internally about enabling multi-factor authentication, if you're having conversations around doing network monitoring or log aggregation, dark web monitoring, strengthening your identity management posture, you're doing things that everybody else is doing, and maybe even a little bit behind the curve on it. So that's kind of one thing that I want to really impress upon people right out of the gate. But with that, I'm going to dive into our Arctic Wolf Labs report. So we have an internal threat research team by the name of Arctic Wolf Labs. And we also have an incident response arm. We do digital forensics and incident response. We also do our managed detection and response service, as well as some other services. But like the Dr. Jerry was saying, we have broad visibility into a lot of different things. So let's kind of go through some of this Arctic Wolf Labs report, and we're going to start off on the attack types. So we broke it down into basically what we're seeing from an incident response standpoint. So as you can see, the leading category probably is not going to surprise anybody that's watching this, but ransomware and data extortion is number one at 48.6%. So almost 50% of events is related to ransomware or data extortion. I think everybody's aware of what that is. It's very prevalent in the media. So there's really not much to say on that part. The other side of it, which is a surprisingly high number, which is 29.7%, is business email compromise. I think this is a little less known in the, I'll say the industry, like the broader uh, employee base, if you will. Business email compromise is when your Office 365 or Google Workspace or whatever your email client is compromised. This could also be maybe you receive a malicious link or download attachment, right? So th those are all kind of things that results from or what we categorize as business email compromise. Next is the network intrusion, so roughly about 15%. So network intrusion is really where the attackers gained an initial foothold into a network, but we're not able to do what they're likely trying to accomplish, and that's ransomware and data exfiltration. So that again is about 15%. And then we have the other category of right around 7%, and that is really all encompassing of anything outside of what we just talked about. So things like fraud and insider threats and things like that.
One thing I think is interesting about that before you move on is I know we do a lot in the cybersecurity field about trying to teach and educate, show people that phishing emails and business email compromise being one of those phishing categories, is that training is so important. And there's a lot of other things like, the vulnerability patching and remediation, which helps cut down on the network intrusion. But this is a kind of cool graph in that the chart shows that not only are you breaking out business email compromise as a category of incident response that you're doing and performing, but in a lot of cases, it's the first step before the ransomware. So in
Mhm.
some cases, you could be talking upwards of 80% of the incidents that you respond to are tied to phishing and ransomware combined, which, again, not to diminish any other thing that you should be doing from a cybersecurity perspective, but that really goes to show like it's a lot easier just to blast out an email to a bunch of different companies and see if someone clicks on it than it is to go do reconnaissance on a company, figure out their weakness and infiltrate. And as much as we try to educate, it doesn't appear to be taking hold maybe as well as it should.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think we talked about like the different attack types. Let's segue into the ransomware demands. I think this is a very interesting thing. So this labs report is really looking at the year of all of 2023. So with that, let's compare it to the year prior, 22. So we saw a 20% increase overall in ransomware demands. This is kind of interesting because if my memory serves me correctly, our 2013 threat report said that they were actually pretty stagnant. So the ransomware demands are getting up in increase of dollars. I think there's a lot of reasons why that is the case. I think that the threat actors are starting to struggle a little bit. I think the greater economy is affecting them. So they're getting a little bit more uh, brazen with the asks of dollar amounts for their victim organizations. These are also industry verticals that we wanted to call out that heavily rely on digital assets. Healthcare organizations, they keep personal healthcare information, PHI. Finance industry, there's lots of emails that go back and forth with financial details and bank account information and things like that. Legal and government, that's pretty self-explanatory. Nobody wants their lawyer to be compromised. Retail. So as you can kind of imagine and play that out, it's pretty understandable that these are some verticals to highlight. If for whatever reason you're watching and you don't fall into one of these categories, 600,000 is the average across all industries, which I don't know about your organization, that would be pretty heavily impactful. So it's a really big deal, something to think about. Getting into business email compromise a little bit here. So like Dr. Jerry pointed out, it's trivial to do. You go utilize your standard LLM. I'll call out ChatGPT as one of the tools that are out there to leverage, one of many. And you say, hey, I want to craft an email. I work at Wells Fargo, and I would like to ask my customer in a polite way to change their password, right? And you'll get some wording help from ChatGPT to do that. And there's other crafted LLMs that attackers have actually developed themselves to automate all of this crafting of a malicious email, which makes it trivial for anybody to actually go do. Meaning that, you know, somebody that can barely speak, honestly, can go out and actually perpetrate these attacks. So it's a low barrier of entry. And like Dr. Jerry pointed out, you can send broad mass emails out and just see who clicks. So it's about kind of the spray and pray approach, if you will. So there's a big threat with email, business email compromise. As you can see, there's the top 5 verticals here. I think there's a lot of continuation of uh, some of the industries that you see more frequently targeted. This is, I think, more of the same. None of these on the top 5 list are at all surprising to me. Jerry, are they surprising to you at all?
I wouldn't say they're surprising, but I think what is surprising about it is you take the federal government in any agency across any portion of the federal government, you look at healthcare, you look at finance, I think those will resonate with anybody. Oh, we expect them to get targeted. But it definitely for MSPs who, like Ntiva, where we deal with clients in the SMB space, I can't tell you the number of times I've heard a client come and say, well, why would anyone want to attack me? I have nothing of any
Right.
value to them. So when I see construction, when I see potentially manufacturing, nonprofit, those kind of jump out, not as alarming, but maybe those ring a bell with folks to say, wow, I work in this industry. I would never have thought construction was number 2 on the list. What is it that we have? And at the end of the day, it might not be the information, it's the value of it from that ransom perspective. But nonetheless, the idea that you don't work in an industry these days that would be targeted, and why would anyone want to target you, I think are long gone. And to your point with how easy it is to do this, this is no more about a nation state is coming after you. This is literally a person anywhere in the world with internet access and the ability to send an email who wants to make money.
That's exactly right. And also kind of keep in mind that some of these threat actor groups are very loosely affiliated with their governmental organizations, and a lot. I'll pick on China for example. Intellectual property theft to develop mimicking organizations is not a new concept. So seeing a construction being number 2, given the fact that we know that oftentimes business email compromise is kind of a broad net and see what you catch type approach. But the value is there for threat actors out of any country really, but China specifically, because I'm picking on them for right now, to be able to identify like how your organization operates. What are the CAD files that of buildings that you're creating? Maybe you're creating building a sensitive building. Maybe they just want to rip off the type of organization that you are and create a parody organization in China, in the Chinese market, and you'll never know about it. So it's kind of a real threat. Um, so let's segue from the different attack types to the root causes of why these events are occurring. Um, this slide, I think, catches a lot of people off guard. I think there's an adage of it's the end user's responsibility to protect our organization, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Do they play an important role in that? Absolutely. Should we enable them and train them and provide technical implementations of controls to prevent them from their own worst enemies themselves? Absolutely. But external exposure is a very real threat. As you can see, 70% of root causes beyond business email compromise are due to external exposure. So let's really look into what I mean by external exposure and kind of some of the subcategories that go into that. So 40% is around what's called external remote access. Think of VPN tools, remote desktop tools. things like that. So oftentimes you can protect those by implementing multi-factor authentication, limiting utilization of those different tools, employing the likes of the Ntiva team to go in and do all of this work for you. There's also known vulnerabilities. This is an important thing to think about. So let's talk a second for what's a zero-day exploit and what's a known vulnerability. So a zero-day exploit is simply a vulnerability in a piece of software that the vendor of that software hasn't rolled out an update that fixes the vulnerability yet. They might not even know that the vulnerability exists. A known vulnerability is there is a publicly available update that fixes the problem. Attackers are constantly looking for these little errors. They're constantly looking for these little software misconfigurations, if you will. Known vulnerabilities are far more important to worry about and to think about, to plan about than a zero-day exploit. And I think our numbers really kind of highlight that with almost 26% of external exposure root causes being known vulnerabilities and only 3.5% being zero-day exploits. So I think that's something that's very powerful to me and something that I've said for years. Stop trying to fix the zero-day problem and fix the what's known problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was going to say almost the same thing. It's kind of ironic that when you see a big zero-day exploit come on TV or it pops up on your phone because it knows the trends that you want to read about or whatever the case may be, folks will, I know just from experience at Ntiva, folks will email me, did you know about this? What are we doing about this? And it is kind of ironic that there's a whole host of known vulnerabilities that no one's patching against. No one's worried about those, but we're worried about that small window of time that an attacker can really seize that zero-day exploit before the vendors come out with some type of patch or workaround. So I couldn't agree more with you that we know we're using external remote access tools and capabilities and services because that's how we get work done in a remote environment. And we know that we have known vulnerabilities. They make up the two largest chunks of your pie chart here. But to your point, I think so many folks' minds just go to that niche little area. And it's not to say that that's not an important area, but if I was going to invest my budget in something, I wouldn't put it in the 3.4% while neglecting the 70%.
I couldn't agree with you more on that statement, Jerry. I think it's important to remember if you're a threat actor, a lot of these organizations are essentially businesses. And think of their zero-day exploits as their intellectual property. Sometimes those are sold in the black market for hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending upon how big of a zero-day exploit it is. So that's their intellectual property. The first time that they use that to attack somebody, that's now public, meaning that intellectual property is potentially no longer as valuable as it used to be to them because now it's potentially that a digital forensics and incident response organization like an Arctic Wolf or an Ntiva comes in, they identify that there was this vulnerability that was used to exploit it, and now the greater public is going to be aware of such a thing, meaning that the manufacturer is going to be alerted saying, hey, there's a known exploit to your program. They'll roll out a patch to fix it. So that's kind of an important thing to think through. And the other scary part about the 26% of known vulnerabilities portion is if you pull back the curtains a little bit more on that, it's I think the vast majority of those known exploits were a couple years old, meaning that there's been fixes to it for a couple years and nobody went and applied the fixes or did the appropriate mitigation strategies to prevent those exploits from being able to successfully happen.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's something folks need to, I think, really focus on because when you convert all of this cybersecurity talk and risk into business risk, and how are you going to mitigate and remediate, it always comes down to budget and time and resources, right? So if you're watching this and maybe you're one of the folks that has to go back to your board or to your C-suite and try to make a case for why you're going to spend a certain amount of money doing something this year, next year, whatever. This is a great slide that really jumps out that says, why wouldn't we spend the majority of our budget on the majority and likelihood of certain exploits and certain things happening? Why would we go take a large portion and spend it on a small amount from a
Mhm.
percentage perspective? I think it helps make the business case for them as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say we talked about Dr. Jerry and I have been in security for a while. It's funny, we always talk about how security is evolving and changing because it absolutely is, but it's really interesting to me that I remember the core things that people should have been doing when I first got into the industry. Those core things have changed over time of how we do it, but are effectively still the things that are going to block a vast majority of the attacks that are used against people. So just an interesting thing. So the other slice of that puzzle from a root cause standpoint was around user actions. These are things that I think we're all pretty familiar with. So almost 10% of the user actions were phishing emails. 8% were compromised credentials. So this could be something as simple as you clicked on a link that went to a website that said to enter in your username and password, and it wasn't the actual organization that you thought it was. It could also mean, your compromised passwords are available on the dark web, and or even outside of the dark web, right? We've seen a big adoption of chat tools like Telegram and such to share threat intelligence for the threat actors. Like they're internally sharing their attack information with different people that are members of their different Telegram channels. Malicious software downloads, that's obvious. If you get a program download in an email, I'm going to say don't click. Always question everything that you see. Question the legitimacy of every email. I think that at no point will you get reprimanded, or should you get reprimanded for practicing a little extra due diligence of, hey, is this information that I really should be sharing with this person? Is this person asking this question, is this out of line for where we're at with them? Those are all kind of some things that you should use. I like to call it the critical thinking skills of email. So definitely flex those critical thinking skills.
I think one other thing to point out here, kind of take this slide, also tying back to one of your previous slides where you were showing um, insider threats being a small percentage. I've really tried to stress through the sessions that I've led that I think insider threat and user actions, espionage, all the terms that relate to the user's behavior take a very negative kind of tone and connotation when they're stated, and that's really not always the case. I think more times than not, it's a mistake on the user's part, or good intention, poor judgment when making a decision. It wasn't to be malicious. I think the percentage, would probably be under 1%. I don't know what it would, specifically would be of the actual folks trying to create espionage and destroy their own company from within. Again, back to the whole China thing. Most people are just trying to get as much work done as possible and as efficiently as possible. And through potentially, poor choices, potential uneducation in certain areas of cybersecurity, they're just making mistakes and don't realize what the consequences are. So I almost wish we changed some of the terminology because insider threat sounds probably more harsh than it is. But configurations, misconfiguring items, typing the wrong thing. It's something as simple as when you send an email and you start to type the person's name and you pick the wrong person, right? Because they have the same first name. All those types of things I think folks don't think about, but that's actually making up 20-25% of this. And then you tie it to the statistics you showed before, and it's the overwhelming majority of all the incidents that you guys are responding to and reporting on.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a thing. Um, always, if something makes you say a you should say something, right? You should report it to your team over at Ntiva. So let's talk through. We've talked through the what's happening, the cores of how everything's happening, like the root causes of things. Now let's go to the happy part, and how do we stop these things from happening in our organizations? So I've got some general guidance. I'm sure Dr. Jerry has some additional guidance. And obviously, these are all things that the Ntiva team can help identify specific tools and resources and services and things like that to go out and do all of these things. But so with that, develop a solid understanding of your overall attack surface. I One of my favorite security adages, and there's a lot, is you can't protect what you don't know you have. And that's a really important thing to know. So utilize tools that are constantly trying to identify what your attack surface is. So that way you can implement the proper procedures and controls to protect those assets. Um, Ensure you have broad visibility into the environment. So once you've been able to identify what you have, monitor it, right? Employ log aggregation tools that monitor logs. Employ teams that go in and monitor network traffic. Uh, Employ teams that go in and monitor endpoint information and things like that. So once you know what your attack surface is, have it monitored. Enforce strong identification controls. This is a really big one. Make sure that like if you have employees that leave, you have proper change management controls in place to where their account gets deleted right away. Um, and ensure that you have multi-factor authentication for everybody, right? Some of those things. Employ a zero trust security strategy. I'm going to apologize on behalf of some of my industry. I think we have overutilized the term zero trust. I've seen organizations come out and say they have zero trust products. Zero trust is a security methodology. It's not a product. You can't just buy something and say that you're zero trust. And what I mean by zero trust is act as if everything in your environment has been compromised, i.e., coming back to another one of my favorite security adages of security should be practiced in layers, in like an onion. So have a lot of layers. So that way, if one layer gets compromised, you have five other layers that the attacker has to get by to protect you. Um, I think that with COVID, everyone went remote, and I think the adoption of cloud tools just grew exponentially during that time period. And I think the security around those cloud tools can be lacking from time to time. So work with the experts over at Ntiva to make sure that your Azure environment is locked down. If you have an AWS, GCP, Office 365, just make sure that you're working with them to ensure that all of your cloud posture is completely locked down. These providers don't do that for you. They don't implement security for you. It's your responsibility to go out and do that. So definitely rely on the experts to help you with that. And then maybe the most important thing is establish a culture of security. That is a really important thing. Utilize the critical thinking skills, incentivize team members to think critically as it pertains to the security of both the employees within the organization's data, your customers' data, finances, and things like that, things that are core to your organization. If your organization adopts a culture of security, you're going to find yourself in a much better position against the day that an attacker does take focus on your organization rather than doing the wide net approach. So those are some of the things that really I wanted to kind of call out based upon some of the threat intelligence that we see on our side and some of the things that are going on in the industry. Jerry, what are your thoughts on these? Do you have any additional things that you would like to add into that mix?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'd like to mention is, from an MSP or MSSP perspective, the service that Arctic Wolf provides to our clients and to Intiva, we eat our own dog food here in this, um, is extremely important. And I know it's one of the more costly solutions compared to, say, MFA or an antivirus tool. But I think it's worth folks taking time to look at what you've presented today, talk with folks at Ntiva, because the service is providing 24 by 7 by 365 support. You're gathering in a lot of information and intelligence that neither Ntiva nor the client is going to be able to natively grab themselves. We're only going to get small chunks compared to what you get. You're going to see things on a mass scale. You're going to be able to respond better than a single individual can. And what I've found over the years working in the federal space before coming into the MSP space is, while this is an expensive solution compared to something like an MFA, when you look at the overall cost of this solution, it's almost always cheaper than hiring a single person. And the reason I bring that up is because we often love to say, well, I'll just go out and hire a person, and maybe you can get the person for the same cost. But that person cannot sift through the amount of data that you guys go through. I was hoping maybe you might know off the top of your head some roundabout figures as like the number of incidents that you see or events, the number of things blocked across your client base, just to give people some idea of how large this really is and what you would be expecting one or two people to do if you hired them and manually expected them to do the same work.
Yeah, so I have some mind-boggling numbers to share on that. So, uh, of the what we call raw log events, so this is data that's just coming into our platform. We see about 5.6 trillion events in a singular week, which is massive. We analyze events, so the data that we bring in, meaning that we have it parsed so we can normalize it so it's viewable by a human, it's readable by a human, it's inspected and analyzed. So those analyzed events in a week are still 1.4 trillion events. Those 1.4 trillion events, and as you can kind of tell, we're starting to build a funnel, right, of broad visibility to actionable security insights. So the security investigations, which our teams perform, we probably have one of the largest SOCs for sure in North America, if not globally. We have north of 700 employees within our SOC, which is massive. We do, like Dr. Jerry said, we run true 24/7, meaning we always have people working at any given hour of any given day, and not just people, just large groups of people working at all times. So of those 1.4 trillion analyzed events that our tools analyze, we actually have 129,000 security events that our teams are actually investigating to see if they're actionable security events. And of those 129,000, about 37,000 go out to our customers globally in the form of a ticketed event. So those, again, meaning that both our tools and our security experts were able to analyze the information to ensure that something is an actionable event, and we go in and action on that event. Sometimes we will use our agents to do containments. We have identity containment capabilities now, so we leverage things like Entra ID, Okta, Duo, to basically lock users out of accounts if we suspect that the account is compromised. So there's a lot of really interesting things that we can do to kind of prevent the bad situations from occurring.
I think one other thing I'd point out is um, I think I don't judge my clients. If a client just wants to be compliant because they have a regulatory compliance requirement or they get audited, they need to be certified in something. If the security posture is not the top of their mind and their budget, I understand. Some folks are really heavy into compliance, some are really heavy into a great security posture, some have a mix of both. I think at the end of the day, though, the message that really goes out, and it would be its own webinar, we couldn't cover it all today, is more and more we're seeing cyber insurance providers say, here's what we want to see at a minimum, and each year they're adding to that minimum list. We're seeing clients and vendors say, here's what we want to see at a minimum, or we won't do business with you. So this topic is continuing to gain traction and steam and get larger just every day. On top of it, when we talk about ransomware and we talk about the figures, you look at it and you presented a slide from what was the ransomware payout per industry. But one of the things that when you talk to insurance companies and some of the other folks that we'll have on, they're saying the ransomware payment is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you're going to be down. You have to, what's the amount of money that you're going to lose while your business is down? How much are you paying to restore? How much are you paying to then fix whatever problem, that vulnerability, and mitigate that risk that was there that caused it so that you don't turn around and get attacked the same way a week later? The cost is
Reputation loss.
exponentially larger than the ransomware payment. So it might even be that the ransomware payment is the cheapest portion of the attack. And one of the worst feelings I have is every time we have a customer come to us who was attacked using many of the exploits that you talked about, they say, I really want to get this service. And it's like, I'd love to set you up, we will, but it's not going to help you for what you're going through now because it wasn't in place. So it's great for the future, but there's nothing we can do retroactively. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I have for folks is if you want visibility into your network, if you want to try to prevent something, if you want to contain it and eradicate it as quickly and as cheaply as possible, you have to have these solutions in place before it happens. And I think most of our client base is now understanding that it's only a matter of time until each one of them is attacked. And it's kind of like that, people think you can't get struck by lightning twice. You can absolutely be attacked more than once, sometimes by the same company. So if you're not doing these things, you're putting your organization at so much risk that it's almost like playing roulette or a Russian roulette with your business. So I really encourage them to. Well, let me ask you this, Brad. Do you have links or information where they could get the whole report? Beautiful. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so maybe folks that are watching this go out to Arctic Wolf's website, sign up to get the reports, take a look at it. It has more data than what we went through today because there just simply wasn't enough time. But I think look at that data and then look at it from your company and your industry vertical's perspective and say, am I at risk of these same things? And how much can I afford to lose, on in a day, in a week before this could close the doors on your business? And then reach out to Ntiva and say, what can this partnership do for me and see if we can make it fit their budget. Sorry, that was probably a lot, but
I
had to get
liked
it out before I forgot.
I liked it. All good stuff.
Any other thoughts, any tips or tidbits, anything you want to leave folks with before we adjourn?
No, I think this was a really productive session. Hopefully you all learned something from it. Really excited about, the partnership that we have with Ntiva. And, it's one of those things where the best in class like to partner with the best in class. And I really think that that's where our partnership really aligns and shines. So again, Jerry, thank you for having me. Thanks to the broader Ntiva team for having me on.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate you joining. Thanks for bringing this great information. And again, folks, when you watch the video, please take a note of those links that Brad has put up there. Go get those reports for yourself. And if you have questions, reach out. We'll be glad to work with you and explain things and help you out. But until next time, Brad, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it as always. And everyone else, thank you for your time. Have a great afternoon.